Hello. Welcome to week 2. We are covering this week ethical objectivism versus ethical relativism. So, if you have been keeping up with Bar, you will know that there is a video that is already in there that kind of goes over the basics already. And he goes kind of through a few other things, like how to think about the two different ideas, as well as examples, terms, and several other things that are very, very useful. So I hope that you have watched it. I did want to be able to come at it from a few different angles, kind of address some of the issues that some of you indicated in Welcome Week that you want to hear brought into the content. And just talk about it from the things, the point of view of the things that I want you to be remembering and paying attention to, not only in the videos, but definitely in the readings. For those of you who have the elements of morality, they didn't cover ethical objectivism versus relativism, but it covered instead cultural relativism, which is just as valuable. But you will actually kind of get double the benefit, just because your book covers it from an entirely different perspective, focusing on cultural relativism. Poshman does it, but he doesn't really stick there. He kind of tries to give a more blanket view over all of the terms, as opposed to sticking to that one specific angle. But because that is the view that most people have subscribed to in our country, we're going to go into a lot of detail about it. So all of that's very important. For those of you who have turned in your Welcome Week assignment and your Week 1 journal, thank you. I am in the process of grading. If you'll notice that I have gone back and I have tried to write everybody back, it does take time, and that time is consuming sometimes. Know that I am getting to it, and I am keeping up. Because there is a span of a week that we have to get all of our classwork done, and that's also how I am going to count attendance. If you would like to actually have lecture where we can engage one another, maybe we'll set it up to do it on Facebook Live, or I may need to play with the Bar platform to see if there's a way we can set that up and make it like a webinar, and then be able to dialogue back and forth. But if that's something that you're interested in, you don't want me to just upload either generic videos or videos that I have recorded giving you the content, please do let me know. Because that makes a world of difference. I gotta tell you that it's not the same as being in the classroom. I miss the opportunity to be able to see you and to engage you and to be able to have dialogue together around the subject matter, because this is the type of subject that you want to be able to talk about in community, that you want to be able to hear other people's ideas on and be able to learn from them, as well as be able to offer your own ideas in that learning process. And so I am sensitive to that. I would like to honor that. So feel free to give me your feedback, whether that's through sending me a message on Bar, attaching it as a line in one of your assignments, however is most convenient for you. Just let me know. I also keep my phone and my email near me. So for those of you who have sent emails, most of you, you'll know that I try to respond fairly quickly, definitely within 24 hours. And so there are a couple of you who I did get, I overlooked your email. I'm sorry. Just want to say that I am sorry. Yeah, I've gotten to it by now. I'm almost certain. And so, like I said, I work very, very hard on that. So we're going to go ahead and get into the content. We are in the process of getting ready to do enrollment verification this week, and it was actually just extended a couple days. So because there are students that are still being cleared, they have pushed enrollment verification back just a few days. So it will be coming soon, but I am taking attendance every week based on whether or not you turn in your assignments. That is the metric of whether you have attended class that week, if I have received your assignment. So I do want you to know that if you turn your assignments in late, I'm saying you came to class late. Okay? Works the exact same way. If I don't get no work for that week, you weren't there that week. Even if you come back and you turn that work in later, you still miss your participation grade. So I want you all to be aware of that. Also want to let y'all know, welcome to the crib, okay? because I teach online, I teach virtually. I do my lectures wherever, I grade wherever, I read your work wherever I am. And for the most part, I live my life on the go. I travel a lot. I do a whole lot. I got a 7-year-old and a homeschooler. So I'm teaching around the clock at all times. What you see is, this is my balcony. Just give y'all a little view. That's actually the pool back there. You see my books, I got my books up here with me. It's a playground and all kind of stuff. But transparency is very important to me, okay? One of the things we will discuss, and I think it's coming up a little later on, is the importance of character and reputation. So one of the things that you will learn about me is that I believe in transparency and authenticity. So you get to see me in my normal element with my Black Lives Matter Little Rock shirt on, because I am from Little Rock, Arkansas, born and raised, was a Hall warrior. I am a Philandarian, class of 2010, you know, and I got my mala prayer beads on. One thing that I have missed because I'm not able to speak to you in person is the genuine, organic conversation that just flows from being around people and being able to feel their energy. But I keep these bees with me. It's 108 bees, but every day I have an affirmation for my life, something that I want to affirm about myself and what I am trying to grow and live into, okay? There's a bee for every affirmation. So it's one affirmation, but I say it 108 times, multiple times a day. And what that does is it helps train my subconscious to believe everything I tell my conscious mind. Things like I'm powerful and I can do anything I put my mind to, and I live a life of abundance, and I'm free, and I'm able to create my own future and my own path. All different kinds of things. Just want y'all to be able to know that. That how we talk to ourselves and what we tell ourselves is very important. And so you've got to find ways to speak healthily to yourself about whatever it is that you're trying to create in life. So I just want to give you that little nugget of wisdom, okay? Try to do that. And we're going to jump into ethical objectivism and relativism. So ethical objectivism is the view that there are universally valid moral principles that exist among us, okay? These are things that we hear, like the will of God, natural law, common sense, intuition, you know, that higher power, that small, still voice. All of these things that allude to it being something, okay? And people call that something by different names. Being something that guides us, that points us in the right direction, that gives us a sense of conscience to know what's right and what's wrong, okay? And prime example, you know, it's wrong to kill somebody else, okay? Some people feel like that's common sense, to know that we shouldn't harm one another. We should, you know, treat people the way we would like to be treated, golden rule, or virtue ethics, if you will. But for a person who does not subscribe to a view of ethical objectivism, this is totally null and void. But they are these claims that are grand, okay? Basically about how not just one person should govern themselves, but how all people should govern themselves for the sake of a good and a moral world. Now, ethical relativism is a little bit different because it holds the exact opposite, that there are no universally valid or moral principles, because all moral principles vary based on which culture that you're engaging at the time, which is how we come to this idea of cultural relativism. And for those of you who have the Rachel's book, it goes into great detail, the entire chapter does. But cultural relativism is the thesis that states that there are all different types of ways to look at ethics and morality based on the ethnicity and the culture from which people have come. So that basically says that what I do for my life ain't necessarily got to be right for your life. What you do for your life ain't got to be right for my life, but it doesn't necessarily mean that either of us is wrong, okay? It means that we can both have configured ways to be able to live our lives that's good for us, that does not infringe upon the goodness of somebody else's life, and it does not impede upon that either. So there are many different ways that cultural relativism can look. Because for people who do not share that same culture, it can oftentimes be confusing in terms of what people are witnessing when they see different acts. Prime example, Wale had a daughter a few years ago, and Wale is Nigerian. And so when his daughter turned 1, they had a cultural ceremony for her that basically promoted wealth and abundance over her life, for her lifetime. And part of what that consisted of was raining her with expensive and lavish gifts, okay? Making it rain on the child. And so when the video hit like Twitter and, Instagram and the waves, and people got to see it, they was like, why is he making it rain on his 1-year-old daughter like she's a stripper, okay? These were some of the comments that people were making because they did not understand what they were seeing. So in his culture, where there's its own ritual, its own way of doing things, and it has its own significance and purpose, it meant something for them. For Americans who saw that, the only parallel that they could make was a strip club. Because over here, traditionally, where you see people cashing folk out and making it rain, and, all of that is in hip-hop culture or in strip club. But in hip-hop culture, we usually are connecting that idea to being misogynistic with women as well. It's really kind of sad. But that's an example of cultural relativism. Another example, when we're thinking about religion, for those who adhere to Islam, for the women who cover up, and they wear the hijabs and cover their hair, and some of them even wear the niqabs and cover their face, where the only things that you can see is their eyes. To American women, they have been oppressed. They are not able to be honored in a way that American women oftentimes feel like is a cultural norm. But if you speak to women who subscribe to the Islamic faith and subscribe to those cultures to that extent, they will often tell you that that is their choice. That is what they prefer to dress in. And they have their own religious rationale for doing so. Okay? But it's their culture. They adhere to that. It is not something that they feel oppressed or devalued by, but it's something that they value and they want to take part in. And so those are things that should be noted. Circumcision is another one for the Jews, the Jewish men who adhere to that in terms of acknowledging that they've been set apart. Okay, now in America, you got people who adhere to the practice of circumcision, and it's primarily because they didn't have a choice, but because you have a very small or very dim separation of church and state in this country. A lot of our cultural norms have been brought over from different arenas, and we just don't know where they come from. But for people who subscribe to Christianity in this country, many of them also believe that circumcision is a part of that, even though they're not Jewish. They didn't do it on 8th day. They didn't adhere to the rituals or the same rituals that the Jews did. Because of the cultural significance that it has to them. Because you're in a different culture. So even though it still takes place, it means something completely different. And so those are like some of the nuances of how cultural relativism can look when you are in different places and you have the same activity going on, but you have it happening between different cultures. And so there are some differences that we see between cultural relativism and ethical relativism. Okay? Ethical relativism is a normative thesis. And when we say normative, we're talking about theories and principles, rules, basically, the theoretics of how one should behave, not necessarily the practice of what it looks like, what people are really doing. That's what cultural relativism is looking at. How are people actually out here engaging in this? How are people living their lives? And ethical relativism basically explains cultural relativism. It grants validity to the theory or to the traits that are being described there. And so the good thing about that is that they both are able to function in their own right. Like one doesn't cancel out the other one. And one doesn't cancel the other one is because neither present themselves as absolute moral principles. Objectivism presents itself as an absolute moral, because whatever that principle is, it's supposed to be universal to all the people. And that gets kind of tricky sometimes, Because you got to ask yourself what happens when you have two absolute morals or two universal principles, especially if they can't be overridden. That one is not considered more important than the other, or one is not supposed to be enacted over another, that they're both equally as important and equally as valuable. At some point, you got to choose, you know. For example, you know, if you got, let's say you got two ethical principles, and one says that you're supposed to always honor your word, and the other one says that whenever you see somebody in need, you should try to save them from death when you have the opportunity and the cost is low, meaning that you can save them and it's not going to cost you your life, or it's not going to cost you anything of substantial enough value that you should have left them there. Okay, and that can be different for different people, so how we judge that will vary. But let's say those are the two things. You're going to be a person who honors your word, meaning if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it, integrity. And then if you have the ability to save somebody else from dying and it won't kill you, then you'll do that. So let's say you're on your way to a very important business meeting at your office, and it's involving some money. It's money on the table, money to be made by you. And you pull up at the red light, and it's a person who's in need directly on the side of the road who needs medical attention. And you looking at them and you like, man, he don't look too good. And I ain't really sure that if I don't stop and help them, that they won't die. Okay? What do? Because you got this business meeting at your office that's really important, and there's some money on your table around you. So that's definitely where you want to keep your word. Not just because there's something in your own self-interest there, but you want to keep your word because that's your moral principle. That's the absolute. That's what you got to do. You have to have integrity above all things. But on the flip side, you got to help people when the cost is low. So what does it cost you to not keep your word is a question. And a person has to be able to figure out what's right there. And so figuring it out comes to asking yourself, which principle is the obligating principle in that specific situation where no other higher duty could be present, okay? So out of keeping my word and saving somebody's life, which of those duties is the higher one? That's how you make that choice. And we call that the prima facie duty. It's the name of the term. It's the Italian term. The Latin. I don't know. It's one of them. It's in the book. But which one is higher? And almost without doubt, we would definitely say that saving somebody's life is the higher duty over keeping your word. Okay? But that's how you break the tie. Then you have harder situations where it's not necessarily that easy to answer that question depending on what you believe. Okay? So I'm going to give you two other ones. Let's say that one of your absolute moral principles is that self-preservation is always necessary. Okay? Always necessary. Always necessary. I want you to listen to the word. That's why I keep saying it. Self-preservation is always necessary. Absolute moral principle A. And absolute moral principle B is thou shalt not kill. And they sound like they don't go together. I know it. But oftentimes that is how our absolute moral principles work. They don't necessarily go together. They can run parallel to each other, but if you're ever in a situation where they're both on the table and you got to choose between the two, it's going to be a hard choice. Okay? So, example, somebody breaks in your home with the intent to rob and kill your family. Okay? With the intent. Because intent matters. We talked about that a little bit last week. To rob and kill your family. If their intent is to rob and kill you, then it doesn't matter how nice you are, because their intent is going to overrule that. They're going to do what they came to do. And if you surrender, you will not have preserved yourself, thus forsaking absolute principle number one. And if you kill these people to save yourself, then you have broken absolute moral principle number two. So the question is, what becomes the correct response? Which one would be the higher duty in this case? And if self-preservation is already a absolute moral that's on the table, then I would beg to say that it might be the higher duty. Because if yourself is not preserved, then there is no other conversation about this. Okay? Somebody ain't here. And so just being able to acknowledge when that's being made, when somebody is making an absolute claim about how people need to conduct themselves, that should be universal for all people. We know then we're looking at objectivism. I think in the video, the gentleman used the example of the Tutsi genocide, where the Tutsis in Rwanda had a mass genocide, a slaughter against them by the Hutus, who basically ran the government. And they said it was about 800,000 people that died. And he asked, whether or not you think that was right or wrong. If people who feel like, yes, it's wrong, you are absolutely an objectivist. I don't necessarily feel like that. I feel like that does give you an answer when you answer this specific question, because it lets you know that, you are looking at some level of morality in terms of how all people should be treated. Nobody should be treated in the name of material gain or wealth, or exploitation or any of those things, because all people have some kind of sacred worth, sacred value, something that needs to be considered about how they're treated. Okay? But somebody who may feel like it's okay to, off with their heads if it's $10 billion on the table. I'm going to take that $10 billion. There are people out there who feel like that. Okay? I'm not saying it's you. I'm not saying it's me. I'm just saying in terms of us actually thinking about how we apply these principles and what we're looking at in different circumstances. That's it. And so you also have other definitions that were brought up over the course of this study that are going to be important for you to realize, and to make sure that you take note of for your midterm and your final to come up later. Okay, another one is ethical skepticism. Okay, and ethical skepticism is very close to ethical nihilism. Ethical skepticism says we really can't know what's moral and what's not moral. Okay, ethical nihilism says ain't nothing moral. There's no such thing as moral. Anything goes. Okay, they're usually extremely pessimistic. People who stand with this view, and they don't have desires to do anything positive because there's no purpose in positivity. Because good is possibly an illusion too. And they may be destructive because of it. Okay? It may look a multitude of ways. Ethical skepticism is a person just like, I can't trust that. I can't trust anything for the most part. But they definitely are sure that there's nothing universally valid in terms of principles. You've got subjectivism, which is basically related to individual preference and views that morality is a personal choice. So very similar to cultural relativism, it supports the idea that whatever that man do for him in his life is his business. That ain't got nothing to do with me. Whatever happened in their household is their household. Ain't no village. Ain't no us. Ain't no we. I'm you, I'm me, you, and we keep it moving this way. Okay? And so, you never know what that's going to look like when you deal with a society that has people, and it's got a lot of people that have a lot of interactions with each other for a lot of different purposes, okay? Conventionalism states that an act or a principle is morally permissible and only permissible if society says it's okay, okay? So this is what brings up the conversation about things like reality TV and the fact that it's on and it's available for people of all ages to consume, okay? Especially those whose parents are not paying a whole lot of attention to them. You see everything on there from people fighting each other to, having sexual interactions, to cussing each other out, to, public nuisances. I mean, like, it's all different kind of things, okay? And it's just out here for everybody to see. Same thing with, I was about to say something about food, and then I tried to think about whether or not this was the right segment to begin to go into that. But it begs the question. The veganism movement has been one that has been very big recently. And so animal rights and asking whether or not we should be more concerned about that, even though it's an unregulated industry, is another question that often comes up around that. So because we're allowed to kill animals at a high rate for the sake of our consumption, and that's legal, does that necessarily make it right? And so you've got a lot of people that are out here that says, no, it's not right, and I'm not going to consume it, even if they do make it legal. Let's bankrupt the industry. Let's not put any money there. So let's not buy meat. Let's not buy dairy. Let's not buy furs. Let's not buy anything that is the product of an animal's life. Okay? And so those are people who have agreed to buck conventionalism, because there are a lot of things that are conventional in this country that are not necessarily moral, but we've made them moral because as a society we partake and participate in them at such rates that I don't even know that we think about them anymore. You know, alcoholism is alive and well at very high rates. Not even just alcoholism. Okay, you got all sorts of issues out here. Abortion is another issue that conventionally has been made right because it's free to do in our society. But you have other people who will argue that it is morally wrong. It infringes on the life of that child, no matter how old that child was, no matter how developed it was. And so these are different issues that cause us to push the envelope and beg the question on, is it moral just because it is conventional? We also have subjective universalism, which denies that moral principles are objectively valid and they must be chosen by rational people to have any validity. So this one is saying that everybody doesn't have the power to be able to make these kind of choices. That a person has to be rational in order to be able to make the decision on whether the morals are actually moral. So now we're qualifying the person. And how that person is qualified has varied in different time periods, in different geographic locations by different people. We're going to look into that a little bit more this semester when we start talking about natural law a little bit more. There's a natural law reading that you have for this assignment that kind of gives you a view on it. But when we look at Immanuel Kant and some virtue ethics and what some of the ideas behind how a person is considered rational in order to be able to talk about morality, it's baffling. It will blow you. Like, who gave you the authority to be able to feel like this is what it was? Okay? And so there's that. And you still got amoralism. That there's no such thing as a moral truth, and all morality is fake. All your claims are false. Just like nihilism, it's like it doesn't exist. Almost anything goes. And so when we look at those things and we realize, man, so much of how we live into our American culture is culturally relative in the sense that everybody does their own thing. The notion of the village, the tribe, people who all believe one thing, functioning together as one body and living together by that set of core values, is dwindling in certain senses. In certain senses, it's not. Okay, so we've got to be keeping our eyes open and assessing not only where it's happening, but where that can be beneficial for us. I say that just in terms of thinking about the unity that we have as a people, as black people.